Thank you to eMerge for hosting this panel. I'm especially honored because I'm a Miami native, born and raised here. My name is Michael Samway. I'm on the faculty at Georgetown University as an adjunct professor, and I've spent about the past 15 or so years in the tech and policy field. We have some terrific guests, some influencers and thinkers on a topic that may seem a bit unconventional for eMerge. Free expression, privacy, civil liberties, and human rights. But what I think you'll find is that it's not so unconventional. For all of you who are entrepreneurs, who are interested in innovation, in building companies, in living under responsible government, these topics are central to what you do. One quick example, WhatsApp. Is anyone on Facebook? Anybody not on Facebook? Does anybody use WhatsApp? So remember, not long ago, WhatsApp had 500 million users and was purchased in stock by Facebook for almost $20 billion in cash, in stock. Does anyone know how many employees WhatsApp had at the time? Fewer than 50. So here's a company with a global reach with fewer than 50 employees, and at the turn of a switch, they had issues regarding privacy, security, free expression, civil liberties, and human rights. There was a recent announcement by WhatsApp regarding end-to-end encryption. This is something that few of us would have thought about just a year or two ago. Now with the Apple FBI case, encryption is a common term, sometimes used even around the dinner table. So we're going to cover those subjects. We have a terrific panel, again, of influencers and thinkers. I'm going to quickly reintroduce them. We've all worked together. A little bit of format. We have intentionally left this conversational by design so that you can hear from them kind of real time. We didn't plan the questions. Each is an expert in her field, and each has worked together. So I think you'll enjoy the discussion that comes kind of based on where the discussion is going. So Danelle Dixon is the Chief Legal and Business Officer at Mozilla. She leads their legal, public policy, and business development function. She's going to tell us a bit about Mozilla and more. Laura Juanes is the Assistant General Counsel at Yahoo, responsible for international privacy and human rights. She is from Spain and a lawyer qualified in Spain. Nuala O'Connor is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Democracy and Technology, a global advocacy group that fights and champions an open, innovative, and free internet. She's also a former Chief Privacy Officer of the Department of Homeland Security, so can give us a perspective from the advocacy community, from government, and also from her time actually in the private sector. So Nuala, let's begin with you. I mentioned encryption. Here's something that I feel like I couldn't spell a few years ago. Now it's top of mind for so many of us. What is it about encryption that's so important? Why should innovators, entrepreneurs, people building businesses, people at eMerge Americas care about it?
So I was asked recently by someone in the community, how important is this? And really, why should we care as we're building our businesses and our tools and our new products? And they said the question, is this an existential threat? And I thought, wow, that's a big, big way to, those are big words, like encryption. It absolutely is an existential threat. The fight between Apple FBI, the conversation around encryption, and about our ability to keep our innermost private thoughts and communications and dialogue sacred and away from prying eyes, absolutely is, to me, one of the most compelling threats we in the digital economy and the tech community in the world are facing, because we see a world, and it's based on my time, as you point out, not just at Homeland Security, dealing with very serious threats to people and places and their lives, but also in my time, for example, at Amazon or at GE, where we were building products that were going to power your homes and your cars and your daily lives. I'm incredibly proud, actually, of the work I did on the Amazon Echo and a number of other products that really thought about minimizing data and minimizing the intrusion on your home, but still allowing you to really use these products to the fullest extent and make your lives better. But if we're going to have products and data collection in what we call in law school, inside the curtilage, inside the boundaries of your home and your private space in your car, we've got to have rules and we've got to have limitations on how much the government, frankly, can see about you, about your ordinary lives. That's not to say there aren't compelling threats. I'm happy to talk and be a complete downer about, frankly, all of the threats that I've seen in my personal life and my professional life. But we've got to envision a world where there are sacred spaces, where your rights and your dignity is protected from the other, from the outsider, from your government.
So, Nuala, would you like to go ahead?
One of the things I was going to say about that is that this whole debate on encryption, it's so awesome that we're talking about it publicly and that we're talking about it in mainstream media. But oftentimes we forget the fact that encryption is used every day by all of us for banking, for healthcare, not just communications. And when we look at these issues just from the standpoint of the threat, the terrorist threats, which are awful and horrific, but we look at it from there and don't look at it from the standpoint of if we stopped building robust technologies that protected users every day, what would happen? What would happen if on a mass scale they had access to all of our financial data and held it hostage? What would they do with respect to that? That's why I think about it from the standpoint of it's the government's job to protect the safety of all of us. We as technology companies, we do our part by making sure that we provide the best security for the data that we collect and we have for our users. And if we do that, then we're helping in the public safety, in fulfilling that public safety obligation from my standpoint.
Yeah, and only to build on what Danielle is saying, I think we should ask ourselves the question of what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and is it by undermining encryption? Are we really contributing to the solution that many people are hoping to look for? And is that the right path to your thoughts and your questions, for sure?
And I think that's why you see a schism between law enforcement and national security, because as Janelle points out, and as Laura seconded, your encryption, your communications are part of our national security. The infrastructure that runs on encrypted technology, including our power plants, our nuclear power plants, our long-term viability economically and environmentally depend on encrypted technology.
So Nuala, could you talk a little bit about the Center for Democracy and Technology's efforts to inform the startup community? You do a lot of work on advocacy on multiple topics. One area is to provide a resource on free expression, privacy, security practices. We have a lot of budding and already successful entrepreneurs in the room from the US Hispanic market, Latin America, from the US and Europe. What are some resources that they might use that CDT offers, in addition to the advocacy work that you do?
Thank you so much, Michael, for asking that question, because people often have thought of CDT as a Washington-based, lobbying focused on the government or in Brussels or in other parts of the world, and we do all of that. We do write to our legislatures and we talk to them, and we filed amicus briefs in courts. We filed in the Apple case on Apple's side, obviously. But I'm really excited about and proud of our kind of direct-to-you communications. If you go to our website, www.cdt.org, you can find kind of primers on basic privacy policies and how to write programs and how to think about these issues from a startup community standpoint. We've done workshops in New York and in San Francisco and in Austin and other parts of the world just to talk to people about, as you're building your products, building in, there's a phrase many of you have heard, privacy by design. I like to think of it as kind of civil liberties and free expression by design. Thinking about the impact on the individual of the choices you make in the actual code, in the technology as you're building, is so essential to getting these issues right. And then also thinking about the programs that you build as you get bigger and bigger, and how you make decisions about people coming onto your platforms and how you interact with your consumers and your customers. The choices you make sometimes have unintended consequences, as we've seen with a number of companies that we've partnered with to think about not just the code and the policies they put in place, but the programs they build and how they treat their customers really have an impact on people's daily lives.
And Laura, at Yahoo, one of the teams you're responsible for is the Business and Human Rights program, which focuses on free expression and privacy. What is some of the kind of the how and why of the program?
Yeah, sure. So definitely Yahoo is the very first tech company who put together and who implemented a business and human rights program, which you actually created. So one of the things that I think we realized early on, Yahoo is a pioneer. We are 21 years old. We were one of the very first companies to have dedicated privacy professionals, the first company to have a business and human rights program. And today we realize we have 1 billion users over the world. We impact the lives of 1 billion users. People come to us to inform themselves, to entertain, to discover, and to share their thoughts and to share their experiences in very private and in very public ways, in many different ways. So everything that we do has an impact on their privacy and on their right to freedom of expression. So we do recognize that we have an important role to play in protecting and enhancing those rights. So it's really important, especially in this room full of entrepreneurs, as you start thinking about your businesses and as you start thinking of putting your products together, the earlier that you start putting those considerations into your business cycle, into your life cycles, the easier it will be and the seamless it will be as you start incorporating it. So definitely, and to Nula's point, there's plenty of, this is not an unmanageable task. This is not a humongous monster that is not available, that is only available to huge companies. To Nula's point, there's plenty of resources out there to build your programs and to incorporate privacy and human rights considerations into everything that you do. And there's a great community out there that is willing to help you and that is willing to share their experiences with you. We actually, a little bit after the first eMerge Americas, we put together with the Ignite Foundation, we co-hosted an event called User First, where we gathered companies of all sizes, startups, medium-sized business, big companies, and experts in the field from different organizations to actually come together and look at not just at the challenges, but also at the incentives of getting this right and doing it and incorporating it into your programs and into your business from the very beginning. So we're definitely we're a part of the dialogue, but we recognize it is a much bigger dialogue than it's not just about big companies and a few organizations out there. This is a dialogue that requires all of us to sit together.
So I'll add that in addition to partnering with eMerge, with Lab Miami, with the Knight Foundation, Laura and her team at Yahoo are based in Miami and have been here for probably 15 or 16 years in Coral Gables. So there's clearly a commitment to this market. And I encourage you, if you come across a user-first event hosted by Yahoo and co-sponsored by others in the community, you should attend. It's great information that you should be thinking about, whether you're a healthcare entrepreneur interested in fintech or just someone with an idea that involves technology. Danelle, Mozilla. So many of us are deeply familiar with Firefox, whether for iOS or for Android. Tell us more about Mozilla so the audience has a clear understanding of what Mozilla is about, where it comes from.
Right. So Mozilla is, I look at it from the standpoint of several different angles of how we approach things. At our very core, who we are is an entity that strongly believes and is committed to the open web. It is our most important global asset from the standpoint of being able to get information to be out there and available to everyone. So that's we're actually a nonprofit where the Mozilla Foundation is the parent corporation of the maker of Firefox, which is the Mozilla Corporation. And so we have a mission that we actually all have to line up to, and all of our products have to be delivered under that mission, and the mission is to build and sustain an open web and an accessible open web. So it's really great to work for a company like this because we have products that compete in the marketplace. We compete with people like Google and Microsoft and Apple, which is really hard because our company is much tinier, but I like to say we're tiny but mighty in terms of our scale and our reach. We have a huge community, and the Latin American and Brazilian communities are so important to us and very, very strong for helping us to not only build our products, we're open source, so they contribute to our code base. But from one of the things that I do from the public policy standpoint is we look at what's happening throughout the world, and we have 7 people on my team to cover the whole world, and so we can't do that. And so we use all of the folks in our community to help us, to educate us about what's going on there. And we're able to keep up to speed real time about what's happening and what's important, depending on the legislation or court cases that happen in region. And so much of what we do is we build Firefox, and I like to think of Firefox as sort of the way that we express our commitment to the mission. And we have Focus, we have other applications with respect to Android and on iOS, but really it all is an expression of who we are as Mozilla. The things that we try to push out there from the privacy and security standpoint is we really look at it from creating principles and standards that we not only hold ourselves accountable to, but we would love contribution from folks out there to tell us if they work. We did Lean Data Initiative, and that's focused on helping startups to think about data in a way that's an asset to them and not a liability to them. So start early with respect to data. We have this really interesting thing. It's an open patent license that we pushed out there recently to get people thinking in terms of not using patents to exclude, but using patents to help everyone innovate. So you create a patent license and you use this open patent license that we've developed, and then you can actually protect it, but you can allow others to work on it as well, so that you have your IP and you're protecting your IP, but you're not excluding anybody from innovating on it. So we try to do these things, and it's not for Mozilla, because we look at it from the standpoint of this is all about the web and trying to create that open and robust web. So there are so many issues that I think that all of us care about as an industry and a tech sector. Privacy and security are two of the most important to us, and we all need to line up behind those and try to create the best tools that we can so that we can make this even better and more robust.
So I'll add that Danelle arrived on the red eye from California and immediately went into press interviews. So she's been in interviews with Latin American press organizations all day, in part based on a recent announcement in Paraguay. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we just 2 weeks ago, I'm going to say the language wrong, but we used in collaboration with our community and with professors in Paraguay, we were able to put Firefox in Guarani. I hope that's right. Agua Batata is the way that they translated Firefox into that language. This is one of the things that we like to do using the community, and the community actually uses us to actually make it so that they can communicate with one another in ways that make sense. We're the first browser to be able to be translated into that language. We have also languages in Mexico, very specific dialects that we've translated our browser into. And I have to say, like, we as paid staff at Mozilla Corporation haven't done that. We rely very heavily on folks who actually know what they're doing in those languages. You can't just put it into a translator and make it work. You really got to know the dialects and know what the words are and choose them wisely. So this is one of the things that we spend a lot of time, and the Latin American and Brazilian communities are crazy important to us. Just because I look at that area, and I'm sure you guys would agree, as looking at the policy that is coming out of there and how focused they are on building internet economy in those spaces. It's so important. And so when we focus on the community there and really learning about what's happening and what they need, it's one of the things that we all need to look at to see how we're going to further develop.
And Nuala, you just interviewed Ed Snowden. What's your sense of the role of government in sort of the balance, if that's the right word, and some think it's not, between privacy and security, or at least the discussion about privacy and security?
Good Lord, you're trying to wave all sorts of red flags in front of me saying it's a balance. And so I was very privileged to be a part of an event at the University of Arizona with Glenn Greenwald, Noam Chomsky, and Edward Snowden. And that was an interesting combination of kind of historical and current thinkers on these issues of the balance of power between the self and state. I would not describe it, and I've said this for a long time, that I don't think it's a balancing between privacy and national security, because frankly, in times of great crisis, privacy usually loses in those conversations. So I strike that word entirely from my vocabulary, and I say, really the tension is between the self and the other, the self and another person, the self and a company, and self and state. And how do you strike those kind of relationships or balances, if you want to use that word, in a way that is most respectful, certainly where I come from and where CDT comes from, is most respectful of the rights of the individual. And in fact, I was thinking you were going to ask me a question about a speech I just gave recently in Washington, where I said, I'm actually, not say less worried about privacy, but my concern for the internet community right now is actually more about free expression and about speech. Everything from kind of how we speak to each other and the kind of dialogue we are engaging in that's frankly being modeled by some of our potential leaders in this country and elsewhere, but kind of the coarsening, or as the president called it, the coarsening of the dialogue, but also about the potential incursions on freedom of expression, both in this country and around the world, really, by governments and by companies that are acting at the behest of government actors. And that, I think, one of the scarier headlines we should say, look at in this country at least, is the flight from Washington, D.C. by a whole bunch of senior government officials out to Silicon Valley to say, you need to help us. And someone said to me, you have no right to criticize this. There's no sin in that sentence that you haven't committed yourself as a former government official. I said, yes, that's because I know what those conversations look like on both sides of that dialogue. It is very hard when the government comes a-calling to say, people are trying to kill each other, you have to help us prevent that. It is a very compelling conversation. But there's got to be lines, and that's why, back to the Snowden comment, the Edward Snowden revelations to me crystallize the blurring of the lines, or the potential for the blurring of the line between the private sector and the public sector. And I still think that the standards need to be a heck of a lot higher even for government use of data, because the consequences for the individual are that much greater. Government can put you in jail. Government can deprive you of life and liberty. Those are much more serious, consequences for the misuse or the misapplication of data. So I could go on and on about national security, but I actually am more worried about the incursions on speech, because after all, why do we want privacy? We want privacy to engage in the most kind of controversial or inquisitive thoughts or dialogue that might be sensitive, that might, we think lead us to censure in society. We want to be able to have minority views. We want to be able to explore thoughts and inquire about things online. And if you feel like you're always being watched, it's already been shown. Pew Internet Life has done some research on this. It's already been shown that in the days and weeks and months post-Snowden, people are self-censoring in a way that is not healthy for the most innovative and creative among us around the world. And this is truly a global dialogue, and we at CDT look at it as a global dialogue. But it is not for any one country to say we are getting this right.
So are you optimistic?
Yes, I am. I'm the ultimate optimist. That's how I do my job. Everyone says, how could you do this job? It's so challenging. I believe we will get it right. I believe we will make a lot of mistakes in this country and elsewhere before we get to the right balance. But that's why encryption to me is so important. It's one of the fundamental tools to create a boundary around your digital self.
So some of the work that you may not see in the papers, but that happens behind the scenes, is collaborative work between civil society, companies, academics, investors, individual experts. Laura, could you talk a little bit about some of the kind of multi-stakeholder work that happens that not all of us read about in the newspapers?
Yeah, definitely. And I think both Denel and Nuala raise a very important point when it comes to optimism, and when it comes to, we are here and we do this work because we believe that we have an important mission, and that we can actually get it right eventually. Like Nuala is saying, we're going to make a lot of mistakes along the way, but we certainly need to try, and we have the obligation, to try. And I think it's important to highlight, as you all, this room full of entrepreneurs and energy, as you're all considering how to start your businesses and how to build your businesses and grow them. I think it is important to consider not just the very obvious choices and the very obvious motivations to start thinking about these issues just because regulators are thinking about it, because there are sanctions, because you could lose opportunity, you could lose the trust of your users. But it's important to look at the optimistic side, and it's important to look at the psychic income that this becomes, not just for your users, but also for your employees. What you do in this field, when you incorporate the care to privacy, when you incorporate caring for privacy, caring for human rights, caring for the trust, to retain the trust of your users, you're building an incredible source of psychic income for the people that use your services, but also for the people that work for you. We get such heartfelt notes of employees when they come to our events, when they hear about the things that we're doing, and we get such emotional responses to, I'm so proud, I didn't know that you guys were doing all of this work, I'm so proud of working at Yahoo because of all of these things. So definitely, I think we need to look, there's a lot of negativity out there. and there's a lot of pessimistic outlook about the future and about the things and about where we're heading to. But I think we need to bring a much positive message, because to your point, and I just drifted away a little bit, there is so much happening in terms of civil society, in terms of academics, in terms of companies, big, small, and medium, engaging in trying to figure out what is the right path to move forward. And I would point, for example, to the Global Network Initiative, which is an organization founded by a number of companies, and when we have civil society, we have academics, we have investors, where we find ways to sit together and to look at these issues from very different perspectives and try to come to agreements and try to move forward and to progress in these issues that are so important to all of us.
So can I just say one thing on that? I think that I'd love for it to be considered optimistic, but I don't think we have the luxury of getting it wrong. And that's pretty much the way that I look at this. It's like all of us, all of our jobs, I'm assuming all of us out here, entrepreneurs in the tech sector, we actually can't get this wrong. We need to figure out even how to make the wrong thing right. And so we look at the way that like just the internet, the infrastructure of the web, and in terms of the internet economy itself, that's all based on data. I'm not going to tell you that's a bad thing. I'm going to tell you that a lot of users don't like it because they don't see it, they don't understand it. We need to get that right. We need to figure out how we can turn this all around to say, this is an asset. We need to get people focused on understanding what it is that this value exchange that transpires. It doesn't matter to me, corporate surveillance, government surveillance. It's our obligation to fix all of this. So it's really easy to say sometimes, like, education's super hard. It's hard to educate a user. And I say, you're damn right it is, but that doesn't mean that we can't try. And that doesn't mean that we don't have the obligation to do that. So all of us, collectively, as stewards of this like great global asset, have the obligation to try to turn this around and make it right. Even all these wrong things that we do, we gotta turn them.
So you raised something about the health of the internet. So in Miami, many, including many in this room, are working hard to build, to use a phrase that's overused, an ecosystem of success around technology, innovation, affordable housing, capital, talent. We want to bring all that together. What are some of the elements that Mozilla thinks about in terms of access, education, to having a healthy internet that allows everything to flourish kind of in the technology industry, given that we're all in the technology industry if we're in business?
Yeah, I think it's such an awesome question because it transcends like every different country in terms of how we approach it. Access is huge, and people think of access and they think about access as just being in those countries that don't actually have the infrastructure set up for it, but it's just as important here in America, and we have to think about access as fundamental. So access starts, though, by understanding that you don't need to just be a consumer of the web. You need to be a participant on the web. And what does that mean? That means you've got to get down to grassroots, to local, to content that helps you, that makes it so that you can figure out how to sell. Like if you're in, a small village and you want to actually sell those 2 extra meals that you have, you need to have an ability to do that through access, through education. So this is why it's fundamental that from our standpoint, we look at this, the open web, as it's so important for the access question to be, that everybody has access to content. That's important. But it's as much as the participatory part of it is as crucial to really getting at the heart of what we need, which is the participation of folks in every region so that we can keep that web robust and so that they can get something out of the system so that they can truly make that economy work for them. When we have that, I mean, that's going to be awesome. I hope that we get that soon.
So Nuala, I know you arrived from Washington today, so you missed Secretary Powell's talk this morning, which was excellent. One of the things he talked about was kind of again, not the balance, but the tension often between expression and civility and the ability to kind of progress as a business or as an individual online. And he mentioned that when he would say something, he would quickly get thousands of comments criticizing him. It would become hostile, less than civil. They would take it down. And then he would go through this whole process of, well, shouldn't I leave it up? Should I leave it down? How do we think about privacy as a fundamental right, but also as a guarantor of free expression? And how do we think about free expression in the digital economy? Where do we begin for entrepreneurs here to think about what we're going to allow? Do we just shut it down? Is that the easy way? Do we allow it? Do we moderate it?
We could talk for hours about that. Let me start by giving you an example of The Guardian in the UK is doing a series called The Web We Want, and they're analyzing comments and dialogue on even just their online platform, and they found that of the 10 commenters who were the most trolled by other commenters, 8 of them were women and 2 of them were male who were minority, ethnic or racial minorities. So it shows that perhaps there's the gender imbalance, maybe a racial imbalance in the dialogue we're having with each other. I do think we need to think about, again, are there policies we're putting in place when we're creating platforms that are unfortunately or inadvertently favoring or disfavoring certain populations? It's a project we're working on at CDT actually called Digital Decisions, about whether there's algorithmic inequality, whether you have unintended bias in the creation of algorithms. A takeaway for all of you who are creating, again, new code, new products, is stress testing your products on diverse populations. These are issues that tech didn't invent, right? I mean, there's the story about advertising in the 50s and 60s before there were a lot of women in advertising, and speaking to the person who's actually buying your product in a language they understand, literally, as Danelle was saying, or figuratively, in knowing your consumer, has always been a challenge for people selling products. From the examples of misnaming products, like the Chevy Nova, right, that doesn't go, and not speaking to women who are the predominant buyers of home packaged goods or whatever. Again, in tech, we're reinventing some of these same challenges. I think it was Oculus that wasn't actually tested on women, and it didn't work with the width of women's eyes and how they focus. So if you want to sell products to half the population, you might want to test them on half the population. Similarly, is there unintended bias in the way we create platforms that favors or disfavors speech? It's something I know good companies are really struggling with. Is there a difference between anonymous and identifiable speech, and should one be prioritized over the other? I think there's always got to be a place where people can be anonymous online, again, to express themselves in ways that they may feel will be they'll suffer the target of real personal anguish or harm if they are known. But there have also got to be ways to moderate in a way that's respectful and brings the most voices, because this is not just about all speech, it's also about more speech and more equality in that speech. So these are hard issues, and Danelle's right. We don't have a lot of latitude to get these things wrong. We really have to think hard about them, and before they're launched, because there's real harm to humans in the world.
So since this is a conversation and we're nearing the close, I'll just offer the opportunity to add any additional comments, and then we'll wrap it up.
So I'll just say, just to add up what Nuala was saying, I think this all comes down to thinking about these issues as we are looking at building the next generation of the internet. It's not only the smart thing to do, but it is the right thing to do. And there is so much potential, and there are so many possibilities that we would only be not doing ourselves a favor if we don't consider these issues from the outset. And there's plenty of tools, there's plenty of resources, and there's plenty of people out there that are thinking already about this issue. So I just encourage you all to join the conversation, because the internet is just not about a few big companies, again, or a few organizations. It's about all of you, and we definitely, the more voices we get engaged, the sooner we're going to get it better, and we're going to get it right.
Yeah, and I just want to say, from the standpoint of the way that we should all try to tackle these things, is that we need to look at we need to think about trust, and trust from the very beginning. And I think, Laura, you mentioned this before. Like, one of the things that we like to think about is you build trust from the beginning. You could even lose a little bit if you screw something up along the way, but you can get it back if you continue to fix those things, and you're honest and you're transparent and you focus on those things. That's what we need to look at as an industry. And I think that if we start from that place and we do our data collection in that way, we think about our users and what the user experience should be, this is the way that we can, and we think about privacy as an asset and data as an asset, and we have to innovate on how to communicate with our users about data. So not just that 10-page privacy policy that everybody out here knows that nobody reads. We need to think about, why is this important to us? Let's innovate. Let's stop trying to protect ourselves. Let's start trying to make this an asset that it is. We do that, and we're going to have like this awesome asset that we have already today be 10 times better in 3 years' time. But that's one of the ways we have to start.
So what I gather from all these comments is privacy really does make the wheels go round on these businesses. Everything that everybody's doing here as an entrepreneur is about serving their customer, but their customer needs to trust that you all are good stewards of their information. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. This is very interesting. Again, a bit unconventional, but I hope you see it less so in the future. And please call on the speakers as you see them around eMerge. Thank you very much.
So I think that what we're seeing right now is ECBA reform, and what you're talking about is how the government is actually using ECBA and not putting any kind of time limit requirement on that so that they can get access to data and they don't have to tell anybody and they can put a gag order in place. I'm hoping that based on what Microsoft was very strategic in when they filed their lawsuit, coming off of the heels of the FBI, coming at the time when we're seeing ECBA reform right now happening in Congress here in the US, hopefully we'll have some, it won't be like what I would like to see in terms of full protection, but we work towards it, right? Baby steps in terms of how that works. So hopefully we can get to something like that.
Please get into that. My name is Marina Meadows, and please contact Human Rights for me because I can't reach them. Thank you.
Thank you.